Hello, my name is Abioga, and today I would like to explain about the introduction. So for the background, the human intracranial compartment is protected by a rigid structure and consists of cerebrospinal fluid, blood, and brain parenchyma. According to Monro-Kelly law, the intracranial volume is always constant. If the volume of one of the components increases, the other component will be compressed. If the body can no longer compensate for this condition, the intracranial pressure will be increased. This condition can occur due to various causes. Patients with raised intracranial pressure should be treated immediately because the effects of increased intracranial pressure are very complex. Patients can have a poor prognosis such as brain ischemia and death if they are not treated quickly. So the formulation of problems are: what is the definition, epidemiology, etiology, pathophysiology, diagnosis, management, and prognosis of increased intracranial pressure. The purpose is to explain about the increase of intracranial pressure and its management, and to answer all of the formulation of the problems. The significance is for public benefits, for the author, and for the author's institution.
My name is Putri Agnes Monica with number student 100. So let me explain about the intracranial pressure. Intracranial pressure is pressure inside the skull that made by cerebrospinal fluid. The normal ICP based on the range of age. An adult normal LCP range from 5 to 15 mm hydrogyrum. For ICP level 20 to 30 indicate moderate intracranial hypertension and need therapy. For the herniation, it can occur with ICP level less than 20 when a temporal mass lesion is present. ICP level more than 40 indicate a serious, life-threatening intracranial hypertension.
My name is Safina Gisitandi with real student digit number 040H. Traumatic brain injury is associated with increased intracranial pressure in most cases. In 2010, Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimated 2.5 million people experienced traumatic brain injury. Unfortunately, there is no specific data about how many people have increased intracranial pressure in the world. American-based population study found 0.9 until 1 per 100 populations have idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Increase of intracranial pressure is multifactorial. Therefore, their accurate incidence rate is still unknown.
Hello everybody, my name is Monica Samalo, student number 156, and I'll tell you about the etiology of the increase of intracranial pressure. So, manufacturing and causes can contribute to this elevated pressure in intracranial, and it can be classified into 6 groups based on intracerebral components such as increase in brain volume, mass effect, increase in cerebrospinal fluid, decreased reabsorption of cerebrospinal fluid, increase in blood volume, and other causes. If someone experiences trauma, ischemia, hyponatremia, hyperammonemia, or uremic encephalopathy, it can cause cerebral edema or general swelling of the brain that can make the brain volume increase. The mass effect can appear after an abscess, tumor, infarct, or hematoma occurs. Increase in cerebrospinal fluid can be caused by increased production of cerebrospinal fluid or choroid plexus tumor. Not only that, because the absorption of cerebrospinal fluid can lead to increase of intracranial pressure and can cause by obstructive hydrocephalus and meningeal inflammation or granulomas. An increase in blood volume is also triggered by various things such as cerebral blood flow, venous stasis, or venous sinus thrombosis, and central venous pressure. And the last one, other causes that can make the increase of intracranial pressure, such as idiopathic or benign intracranial hypertension, called defermitis, hypervitaminosis A, and tetracyclines.
Hello, my name is Ferdinand with digit number 108. About the pathophysiology. Maintenance of intracranial pressure involves 3 major components of the intracranial space: cerebrospinal fluid, blood supply to the brain, including both arteries and veins, and the parenchymal tissue. The enclosure of this component in the skull may be treated as the closed system, and in accordance to the Monro-Kelly hypothesis, the sum of the volumes of the brain, cerebrospinal fluid, and intracranial blood should be in a constant state of dynamic equilibrium, where a change in one component's value should cause a change in one or both of the remaining two in the opposite numerical value.
My name is Diaz Bauskara, student number 168. In a healthy brain under normal intracranial pressure, autoregulation ensures adequate constant cerebral blood flow over a range of arterial blood pressure. In the case where the buffer mechanism is exhausted or impaired, changes in arterial blood pressure may lead to cerebral hyperperfusion, hypoperfusion, and ischemia. In cases of increased ICP, distal cerebral arterioles vasodilate in order to lower cerebrovascular resistance. Arterial blood pressure is increased if vasodilatation was insufficient to offset the effect of increased ICP on cerebral blood flow. Both of these mechanisms have the effect of raising cerebral blood flow volume, and as a result, increasing ICP until cerebral blood flow is completely stopped. This is one of the most common ways that secondary ischemic brain damage can develop in the hours or days after the onset of a primary injury.
Hello, my name is Pratista and my student number is 237. So now I'm going to explain about the symptoms of the increased ICP. Increase of ICP can cause several symptoms such as headache, vomiting, papilledema, neurological deficit, and herniation. First, headache. Headache caused by distortion of the arteries and vein in the durameter. Second, papilledema. Papilledema is caused by the transmission of the pressure to the sheath of the optic nerve. Third is neurological deficit. They can cause symptoms of changes in level of consciousness, anxiety, irritability, lethargy, and decreased motor function. Lastly, if the increase in intracranial pressure continues and is associated with shifting of brain tissue, this will lead to a herniation syndrome.
I'm Wanda with student number 133. The diagnosis of increased ICP can be established from history taking, physical examinations, and other sporting examinations. History taking must be done according to the Fundamental 4 and the Sacred 7 guidelines. Physical examination consists of general physical examinations with vital sign measurement and neurological examination such as mental status level, pupillary, somatosensory, motoric, and oculomotor examinations. The sporting examinations include brain imaging, invasive and non-invasive monitoring techniques. Brain imaging modalities that can be used are CT scan and MRI of the brain. The invasive ICP monitoring technique is external ventricular trained, and the non-invasive ICP monitorings are transcranial Doppler sonography, tympanic membrane displacement, visual evoked potentials, and examinations of the optic nerve.
Okay, my name is Putu Arerari Bramantia and I'm going to explain about the examination. The supporting examinations include brain imaging, invasive and non-invasive monitoring techniques. The invasive ICP monitoring techniques is external ventricular drain or EVD. An external ventricular drain or EVD is a catheter inserted into one of the lateral ventricles and connected to an external transducer via tubing filled with saline. Another monitoring technique is intraparenchymal pressure monitors. Intraparenchymal pressure monitors are placed into the brain tissue via a burr hole and secured using bolts. A pressure transducer is incorporated directly into the catheter as opposed to an external transducer as discussed with an EVD. The catheter requires calibration once prior to placement. The accuracy of the ICP measurements is generally better than what is achieved with subarachnoid or epidural monitors, which have fallen out of favor. One advantage of intraparenchymal monitors is ease of insertion, as one does not need to aim for a particular space or required with an EVD.
Hello everyone, my name is Diayu Sutari, student number 173. Moving on to management of increased ICP. Methods vary for the management of increased ICP, but overall there are two major routes, non-surgical and surgical. Non-surgical, head position. Positioning head-injured patients in approximately 30 degrees above the level of the heart helps facilitate venous drainage. Restriction of fluids. Administering intravenous fluid may help patients with increased ICP. Hyperglycemia. Cases of cerebral edema commonly are aggravated by osmotically active glucose. Ventilatory support. Hyperventilation works due to pH-mediated cerebrovascular constriction, which occurs in response to decrease in partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Corticosteroids. Corticosteroids have been proven effective in the setting of managing vasogenic edema from brain tumors. Barbiturates. Used in a final attempt to control increased ICP in head-injured patients because of its vasoconstriction ability. And surgical, some patients with intracerebral hematomas are candidates for surgical decompression. Usually, subdural and epidural hematomas are surgically treatable.
Hello, my name is Krisanta Paramita Karamaya with name 170. The prevention of ICP can be done by preventing the underlying causes of ICP. Some underlying causes that can be prevented are head injury by wearing protective helmet or seat belt, hypoxia and hypercapnia by maintaining adequate oxygenation and normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide of a patient, and hypertension by reducing sodium intake, avoiding drugs that will increase blood pressure, and using analgesic or sedative drug to reduce pain and agitation, as these two can increase blood pressure. If hypertension already precipitates, especially in patients with traumatic brain injury, beta blockers or calcium channel blockers can be chosen, but avoid using vasodilators. Other preventable underlying causes are stroke by managing diets such as reducing saturated fat intake and getting regular physical activity, and infection such as meningitis by boosting immunity, getting vaccines, and prioritizing hygiene. Fever can be treated by using antipyretics. Thank you.
My name is Anastasia Vanetrixi Kusianto, student number 128. Increased ICP usually lead to mortality and poor neurologic outcome. The prognosis depends on etiology, severity, and management of increased ICP. If not treated well, increased ICP can lead to herniation and blocked cerebral flow, which causes ischemia. Thank you.
My name is Ayuni Putri with student number 141. Clinician monitor ICP primarily in patients who are comatose and in need of intensive care for indication of abnormal deviation ascribed to a variety of types of primary and secondary brain damage. Although mean ICP has proven to be a useful parameter in defining prognosis, a major limitation of using the mean value is that it doesn't incorporate information from the different interacting body systems that are ultimately involved in creating ICP and its variation. Clinicians have to observe several physiological variables that are related to the clinical state to fully grasp the pathophysiology of patients with brain damage. The emphasis of therapy is placed on monitoring a multitude of parameters inadjunct to ICP rather than on one sole parameter.
So for conclusion, increased ICP usually happens after the buffering mechanism for intracranial volume expansion is exhausted, and it will become comparable to pressure inside cerebral arterioles, collapsing the arterioles and cessation of blood flow to the brain. Increased ICP can cause several symptoms such as headache, vomiting, papal oedeme, neurological deficits, and herniations. The diagnosis can be established from history taking, physical examination, and other supporting examinations. The two major routes for management are non-surgical and surgical, and the prevention can be done by preventing the underlying causes of ICP. And the prognosis of patients with increased ICP depends on etiology, severity, and management. So that's all for our presentation today about increased intracranial pressure. Thank you for listening and see you next time.